What exactly shapes a country's reputation? Well, there are many different factors ranging from the actions of its people and government, its economy, quality of life, history, culture, and traditions. Perhaps the biggest influence on a country's reputation is the historic actions of its government. If you are a country known for bombing other countries and/or starting wars as well as meddling with other countries' democratic processes, then chances are you will likely have quite a poor reputation around the world. Whereas on the contrary, if you are a rather neutral country that keeps itself to itself and only ever really makes global news for positive reasons, then chances are you'll have a good reputation with little to no haters. It sounds quite trivial, but another thing which could harm a country's reputation is their sporting accomplishments. By this I mean if you're a country who is one of the best in the world at a certain sport, you'll likely have many rivals, like say Argentina versus Brazil in football or India versus Pakistan in cricket. If you're a country who doesn't really compete at the highest level in sport, this can help to avoid such rivalries and hatred. So let's now take a look at our first country, which could be described as having little to no haters, Iceland. So on the Global Peace Index, Iceland sits in 3rd place. It's a country who has a very commendable approach to war and conflict. Its policy on war is that the country does not participate in military alliances or common or mutual defence arrangements, and does not get involved in other countries' wars. So the only way Iceland would ever be involved in war is if another country directly attacked or invaded them. This therefore means that Iceland is actually not part of NATO, which classes itself as a defensive military alliance. But as Iceland doesn't join any military alliances, it is not a member state. One of the biggest benefits of being a NATO member is Article 5, which states that if any member of the alliance is attacked, then it's classed as an attack on all members and will be responded to accordingly. With Iceland not being a member, this means that if a country were to invade Iceland, none of its neighbours would have to defend them. Whether or not they actually would is another matter. Iceland also remained neutral during World War II. Although it was attacked by Hitler's Germany, as the port city of Dundalk in County Louth was heavily bombed in 1941. Luckily there were no casualties, and as Germany was currently in the process of invading Russia at the time, it took Hitler's attention away from the Irish. Another good thing that gives the Irish such a good reputation is its pretty high quality of life and general contribution to the planet and its people in the Good Country Index. This index ranks countries on quite literally how good they are on behalf of the planet and the human race. In this index, Iceland ranks 9th. When it comes to GDP per capita, Iceland actually ranks 2nd in the world according to the IMF, with a very impressive $106,000. However, this figure is very deceiving, as Iceland is a hub for multinational corporations due to its favourable tax policies. This means that these companies log their huge revenues from inside Iceland, but these revenues are actually made around the world, so Iceland doesn't really get to see or use any of that wealth. The government itself declares GDP per capita as a useless measure. Another factor which gives Iceland such a good reputation is the accent. I've never heard anyone talk bad about the Irish accent. Its sing-song-like rhythm makes it one of the most appreciated accents on the planet. Another English-speaking country but with a massively different accent is a country found on the opposite side of the planet to Iceland. It is the land of the Kiwis, New Zealand. New Zealand is another country which has a very good worldwide reputation. Although the country isn't as neutral as Iceland, it does have a non-alignment policy. This policy means it commits to not being bound by formal military alliances or bloc politics. Just like Iceland, New Zealand is not part of NATO. However, it is part of other intelligence alliances such as the Five Eyes with the UK, Australia, the US and Canada. In the Global Peace Index, New Zealand ranks a very impressive 4th in the world. The geography of New Zealand also helps to give the country a great reputation. The country is known for its extremely impressive landscapes and nature. It's a place where many people aspire to travel or even live. Its remoteness alongside its very low population also makes it a rather peaceful place. It's kind of tucked away from the rest of the world. The country also ranks second in the world in the Democracy Index and third for the least corrupt countries on Earth. So although not perfect as no country is, New Zealand ranks extremely high in the indexes which really influence a country's reputation. It's also generally very peaceful and rarely makes global news for negative reasons. Let's now move on to a non-English speaking country. A country that most people would associate with being a very eco-friendly country. Any ideas which country I'm talking about? I'll give you a clue. It's a Spanish-speaking country found in Central America. It is Costa Rica. From my experience, Costa Rica is one of those countries that is on pretty much everyone's bucket list. It is a paradise for nature. People only ever speak highly of the country. The country ranks as the second most peaceful across all of the Americas. It also ranks second in the Democracy Index for the Americas, and then first in the entire world in the Happy Planet Index. That's an index that measures countries on how they perform with regards to life expectancy, happiness, and ecological footprint. The country gains respect from people from around the world as it's an ecological paradise, but the country doesn't let over-tourism ruin this gem. The country enforces strict guidelines and policies to ensure these habitats don't get destroyed. One very respectable ban that the country has imposed is that you're not allowed to take selfies with wild animals. In doing so, this helps to protect their incredible fauna, especially sloths who can't exactly run away quickly. In 1949, Costa Rica abolished its military as the country wanted to focus on becoming a place of peace and neutrality. The money that it would have otherwise spent on its military and missiles has instead been put into social welfare programs and conservation efforts. So with a population of only around 5.5 million, whilst being an ecological haven and basically having no military, it's fair to say that Costa Rica has little to no haters. Most people respect the country and want to visit. Another country that has no military and is highly respected around the world is Iceland. It's one of the most geographically unique countries on Earth. The country is tucked away in the very northwest of Europe, not far from Greenland and North America. In most indexes relating to quality of life, Iceland usually ranks very high. For example, in the Human Development Index, it ranks third. First for the Peace Index, third for Democracy, and first in the Global Gender Gap rankings. In terms of neutrality, Iceland is a bit of an interesting case study. It is neutral in terms of not being involved in military conflicts, but it is a member of NATO, meaning it relies on the rest of the members to protect it. During the Cold War, the US had a presence in the country, but this was more to do with strategic positioning rather than active combat. Again, just like Costa Rica, Iceland is one of those bucket list countries that most people would love to visit, mainly due to its incredible geography and the chance to see the Northern Lights. The Icelandic people are also known for their friendliness and openness. Their accent is also very nice to listen to. It's very sing-songy and rhythmic, kind of like how Irish sounds. Another thing that makes Iceland so great to visit is their English proficiency. Of course, that's if you speak English too. The chances of you understanding Icelandic if you're not from Iceland is extremely slim. However, some 98% of the country speaks English, which by the way is only 0.3% lower than the UK. It helps that the country has such a low population. It doesn't really ever get involved with global conflicts or issues. The country never really makes global news for bad reasons. Well, unless it's about one of their volcanoes shutting down the entire continent of Europe's airspace. But that was Mother Nature, not exactly Iceland's fault. So it's fair to say that no one ever really has a bad word to say about this cool country. Let's now travel some 8,200 kilometers southwest to our next country. A country which is easily one of the most peaceful on Earth. Bhutan. Now, somehow the country actually ranks 17th in the world in the Peace Index ranking, so take that index with a pinch of salt. So Bhutan is a very unique country who prioritizes gross national happiness over gross domestic product. It would rather have happy citizens and a sustainable way of life than a large economy. This holistic approach is used to preserve and maintain its culture and nature. With the country being tucked away in the Himalayas, as well as it being very hard to actually enter, the country is somewhat closed off from the outside world, so many people don't really know too much about it. The only thing that you ever really hear about this country is its conservation efforts. Even if the Peace Index ranks the country 17th, it is easily one of, if not the, most peaceful countries on Earth. Its crime and corruption levels are extremely low, and similar to Iceland and Costa Rica, it has no military as such, meaning it's not involved in wars. The main religion in the country is Buddhism, which shapes the entire country's values, which usually promotes compassion, mindfulness, and a balanced way of life. I actually don't know a single person who's ever been to Bhutan. Perhaps one of you watching this video has. If you have, let us know what it was like in the comments below. Another country in Asia that is quite the polar opposite to Bhutan but also has a pretty strong reputation with little to no hate is Singapore. Now, although the country is absolutely tiny in terms of population and land size, it is world famous and only ever really spoken highly of. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect, but the quality of life, crime rates and wealth really make it stand out on a world map, especially amongst the rest of Southeast Asia. In many business and finance related indexes, you'll find Singapore near or at the very top. Singapore is also known and respected for being one of the cleanest countries on Earth. It has some of the most extreme laws on the planet when it comes to littering. There are actually laws against chewing gum, spitting and graffiti. Some might call this too authoritarian or a nanny state, but in return you get a super clean country to live in. Now, this next Asian country I'm going to describe as an honourable mention, as in its current form it is highly appreciated around the world. But due to its historical brutality/imperialism, there may still be many countries that hold a grudge against this country. Any ideas which country I'm talking about? It is Japan. Now, Japan has many of the traits just mentioned with Singapore, especially with regards to cleanliness, low crime rates, and general respect for one another. The traditions, unspoken rules, and general way of life in Japan is admired around the world. Everything from train companies sending apology emails if their trains are even a minute late, to the absolute lack of trash in the streets, even though there are no bins, to even how they deeply respect their elders. Everything in Japan is just all about respect. Again, I describe Japan as one of those countries that everyone wants to visit. It's a country that you never really hear a bad word about. Well, that's if you're going by modern day times. They did some crazy stuff in World War II and further into history. Japan is still a military powerhouse and doesn't have the greatest relationships with its neighbours such as China or North Korea. It also has a pretty turbulent colonial past, so it might still have some haters out there. But generally, Japanese culture, cuisine, traditions and history is deeply admired around the world. Now, speaking of honourable mentions, I'm going to also add South Korea. Again, I can't imagine there are many people or countries around the world that dislike this country. However, of course, its northern neighbour would happily nuke it out of existence. But other than its crazy northern neighbour, South Korea and South Koreans tend to have very positive connotations around the world. And for our final honourable mention, I'm going to give it to Jamaica. Jamaica's super chilled, laid-back way of life is well known around the world. Even though the country is tiny in terms of population and size, its culture is widely appreciated and admired. I mean, who doesn't like a bit of Bob Marley? Now, there are of course many countries that could feature in today's video. It is also completely subjective. If you disagree with any that we've mentioned, or you can think of any countries that you describe as having little to no haters, drop them in the comments below. And as always, thank you very much for watching.